Something impossible happened thousands of years ago. A man walked off the face of the earth without dying. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. Actually vanished while still alive. His name was Enoch, and what happened to him challenges everything you've been taught about the limits of human existence. Genesis 5:24 tells us something strange in just 9 words. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. That's it. No grave, no funeral, no body left behind. Just gone. While every other patriarch in that genealogy lived their years and died, Enoch simply disappeared. But that bare sentence in Genesis hides the most radical spiritual transformation ever recorded, because Enoch didn't just vanish. According to ancient texts that were deliberately excluded from your Bible, he became something else entirely, something that shouldn't be possible. He became an archangel, not just any angel, but Metatron, the greatest of all celestial beings, the one called the Lesser YHVH, the scribe who sits on a throne beside God himself. This isn't mythology. This is the most suppressed spiritual truth in history. And if what these ancient texts say is real, then everything you believe about human limitation, about the separation between mortal and divine, about your own potential, it's all wrong. What you're about to read will challenge religious doctrine from every major tradition. It will confront the idea that humans are inherently separate from the divine. It will question why this story was buried, who benefited from hiding it, and what it means for anyone seeking spiritual awakening today. Because here's what they don't want you to know. If one man could transcend human form completely, then the boundary between human and divine isn't as fixed as you've been told. And that possibility threatens every system built on the idea that you need intermediaries, that you're powerless, that transcendence is impossible in this lifetime. Enoch lived 365 years. That number isn't random. 365. The days in a solar year. The ancient authors weren't recording simple biography. They were encoding something. The sun completes its cycle and returns to the starting point. Enoch completed his cycle and returned to the source. But he returned conscious, transformed, fully realized. The text says he walked with God. In ancient Hebrew, this phrase means something specific. It doesn't mean he was a good person who said his prayers. It means he lived in continuous communion with the divine. He maintained a state of connection that most people only glimpse in fleeting moments. He made that connection his permanent condition. Think about what that actually requires. Not just moral behavior, not just following rules. Complete reorientation of consciousness, moment by moment, day by day, for centuries, maintaining awareness of the divine presence. No separation, no forgetting, no sleepwalking through existence. That's not normal human behavior. That's sustained spiritual practice at a level that makes the most dedicated monks look casual. And it produced a result that makes every other biblical story pale in comparison. Because other prophets had visions, performed miracles, spoke with God. Enoch became God's equal. That's why his story was buried. That's why the texts describing his transformation were excluded from the biblical canon. Because they describe something that shouldn't be possible according to Orthodox theology. Something that makes religious authorities deeply uncomfortable. The Book of Enoch was once widely read among early Jews and Christians. The Book of Jude in the New Testament directly quotes from it. Early church fathers referenced it. Ethiopian Christians still include it in their Bible. But in the 4th century, when church councils decided which books were in and which were out, Enoch got cut. Why? Because it contains detailed descriptions of things humans aren't supposed to know. It describes the workings of the cosmos. It names the fallen angels and their crimes. It maps out the structure of heaven. It tells what happens to souls after death. And most dangerously, it shows a human becoming divine. But the Book of Enoch is just the beginning. There's also 2 Enoch preserved in Old Slavonic, which describes his journey through 7 heavens in even more detail. And then there's 3 Enoch, also called the Sefer Hekalot, or the Book of the Palaces, which contains the most explicit account of his transformation into Metatron. These texts survived because mystical communities preserved them in secret. Jewish Merkaba, mystics studied them, early Kabbalists built their cosmology on them, Christian Gnostics referenced them. They were too powerful to lose, too dangerous to make public, so they lived in the shadows, passed between initiates, hidden from authorities. What do these forbidden books actually say? They describe Enoch's ascension through multiple levels of reality, not metaphorical levels. Actual dimensions or planes of existence, each one governed by different laws, inhabited by different orders of beings, requiring different levels of consciousness to access. The first heaven contained the atmospheric realm and the angels who govern weather and seasons. Enoch saw the storehouses of snow and rain, the angels who control winds, the mechanisms behind natural phenomena. This wasn't primitive cosmology. The ancients understood that physical reality has non-physical governance. What we call natural laws, they saw as conscious administration. The second heaven held something darker. Here Enoch encountered the fallen angels, the Watchers who had descended to earth and corrupted humanity. They were imprisoned in this realm, awaiting final judgment. Enoch's role was to deliver God's verdict to them. Imagine a human, not yet transformed, confronting beings of immense power and telling them their fate. The audacity required, the spiritual authority necessary. The third heaven split into 2 regions. One was paradise, a place of beauty beyond description where the righteous dead rested in peace. The other was a place of torment where the wicked suffered. Enoch witnessed both, learning the mechanics of cosmic justice, seeing how choices in physical life create conditions in the afterlife. The fourth, through 6th heavens, contained increasingly elevated orders of angels. Enoch met the seraphim and cherubim, the beings who surround God's throne in constant worship. He learned the sacred songs they sing, the specific vibrations that maintain the structure of reality. He was being educated in the mechanics of existence itself. Then he reached the 7th heaven, the highest realm, the place where God dwells, and this is where everything changed. 3 Enoch describes what happened next in terms so shocking that rabbinic authorities tried to ban the text. Enoch entered the throne room of God. Fire and lightning surrounded him. Millions of angels filled the space, but they parted before him. He walked forward to the divine presence itself. And then God transformed him. The text says his flesh turned to flame, his body expanded to cosmic proportions, spreading across the heavens. 36 pairs of wings grew from him. 365,000 eyes opened across his form, one for every day he lived, now able to see all of creation simultaneously. His face became radiant like the sun. His form towered over all the angels. He was no longer Enoch. God renamed him Metatron. The meaning of this name is disputed. Some say it means one who occupies the throne next to the divine throne. Others claim it derives from the Greek meta, beyond, and thronos, throne, indicating he is beyond all thrones except God's own. Still others find it in the Latin metator, meaning guide or measurer. What's not disputed is his position. He was made Chancellor of Heaven. The divine scribe, the angel of the Lord who records every deed of every soul, the keeper of the Book of Life, the one who sits on a throne, a privilege not granted to any other created being. 3 Enoch records that God himself crowned Metatron and gave him a title that scandalized the rabbis, the Lesser YHVH. He was called by a version of God's own unutterable name. He was given authority over all the angels. He became the primary intermediary between God and creation. This created a crisis in Jewish theology, because one of the core principles of Judaism is absolute monotheism, the idea that there is only one God, indivisible, without partners or equals. But here was a text suggesting a human had been elevated to a position so high that he shared God's name and throne. The Talmud records a story about this problem. A sage named Elisha ben Abuya entered the heavenly realm in a mystical vision. He saw Metatron sitting on a throne, recording the deeds of Israel. Seeing an angel seated in God's presence, something that should be impossible, Elisha concluded there must be two powers in heaven. This was considered heresy. He became known as Aker, the other, cast out from the rabbinic community. The story shows how dangerous Metatron's existence was to Orthodox theology. If a human could become divine, if someone could sit beside God, if the boundary between creator and creation could be crossed, then the entire structure of religious authority crumbles. Because that structure depends on separation. It depends on you believing you're fundamentally different from the divine, that you need priests and rituals and institutions to connect you to what is holy. Metatron destroys that belief. He is living proof that the separation is an illusion. But what actually allowed Enoch to make this transformation? The texts give us clues, but you have to read between the lines. He walked with God is the key phrase. This wasn't passive. This was active, continuous spiritual practice. Jewish mystical traditions that grew from Enoch's story describe specific techniques. Merkaba, mysticism, the practice of ascending through the heavenly palaces, involved intense preparation. Practitioners would fast for extended periods. They would recite specific divine names and sacred formulas. They would visualize elaborate throne room imagery. They would put their body through rigorous purification. This wasn't about being a good person in the moral sense. This was about fundamentally rewiring consciousness, about training the mind to perceive beyond physical reality, about elevating awareness to frequency levels where the angelic realms become accessible. Sacred geometry played a role. The Metatron cube, a complex geometric figure containing all 5 Platonic solids, is named after him. This isn't just symbolic. Ancient practices understood that specific geometric patterns create specific consciousness states. The physical body itself was seen as a temple, a structure whose geometry could be activated and transformed. The transformation Enoch underwent parallels descriptions from other mystical traditions. Kundalini, awakening in yogic practice, describes energy rising through the spine, activating chakras, leading to states of cosmic consciousness. Taoist alchemy speaks of transforming Jing, physical essence, into Kui, energy, and then into Shen, spirit, ultimately merging with the Tao. Christian mystics describe theosis, or deification, becoming partakers of the divine nature. These aren't different paths. They're the same process described in different languages. The human form contains latent divine capacities. Through specific practices, through sustained discipline, through grace or activation or awakening, whatever term you prefer, those capacities can be realized. Enoch's transformation wasn't magic. It was method. It was the result of consistent practice over centuries of earthly life, leading to a point where the physical could no longer contain the spiritual reality he'd cultivated. So the physical itself transformed. The flesh-to-flame description isn't just poetic. Mystical literature across traditions describes light body activation. The resurrection accounts of Jesus describe a similar transformation, a body that could appear and disappear, pass through walls, yet also eat and be touched. This suggests the transfigured form isn't pure spirit but matter operating under different laws. Modern physics begins to hint at this. At quantum levels, matter and energy are interchangeable. Particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously. Observation affects outcomes. The solid, separate, fixed nature of physical reality breaks down the deeper we look. What the mystics described as transformation, physics might frame as a shift in state or frequency. Enoch's 365,000 eyes represent omniscience, the ability to perceive all of creation simultaneously. His 36 wings represent mobility through all dimensions. His cosmic size represents the expansion of consciousness beyond individual ego into universal awareness. These descriptions are trying to convey something that language can barely touch. When he became Metatron, he took on specific functions. As the divine scribe, he records everything. Every thought, every action, every word spoken by every being. The book of life that determines who is written in and who is blotted out. He keeps it. At judgment, he reads from it. Your entire existence is in his records. He stands between God and creation as the primary intermediary. Prayers pass through him. Revelations come through him. He is the voice of God that speaks to prophets. Some traditions identify him with the angel of the Lord who appears throughout the Hebrew Bible. The mysterious figure who speaks as God is called God, yet is somehow distinct from God. He guards the entrance to the tree of life in Eden. He is the angel who led Israel through the wilderness as a pillar of cloud and fire. He is the one who wrestled with Jacob. He is the angel who stopped Abraham from sacrificing Isaac. Every major angelic appearance, some traditions attribute to Metatron. This makes him the most active divine presence in human affairs. Not a distant God, but the very presence of God made accessible, mediated through one who was once human and understands the human condition. That's crucial. Enoch didn't stop being human in his essence when he became Metatron. He transcended human limitations, but he carried human experience with him. That's why he could function as a bridge. He knows both sides. He remembers what it was like to be bound by flesh, time, and death. Now he operates beyond those constraints, but the memory remains. This is the hope encoded in his story. Transformation doesn't erase who you were. It completes it. It fulfills the potential that was always there. You don't become something alien. You become what you were always meant to be. But religious institutions couldn't allow this message to spread freely. Because if people believed they could access the divine directly, if they thought transformation was possible without institutional mediation, the entire power structure would collapse. Christianity built itself on the idea that only one person, Jesus, was both human and divine, and only through believing in him could anyone access God. An earlier tradition showing another human becoming divine threatened that exclusivity. Islam emphasizes absolute divine transcendence. The very notion of a human being elevated to share God's throne would be considered shirk, the unforgivable sin of associating partners with God. So Enoch's transformation had to be downplayed or reinterpreted. Mainstream Judaism, after wrestling with the implications, settled on treating Metatron as an angel created by God, not a transformed human. This solved the theological problem, but stripped away the story's most radical element. Only mystics, Jewish Kabbalists, Christian Gnostics, Islamic Sufis kept the original tradition alive. They understood that orthodoxy serves social stability, but mysticism serves truth. And the truth is that the boundary between human and divine is permeable. This wasn't just theory for them. Kabbalists practiced techniques designed to produce similar experiences. They called it cleaving to God, or devekut. Through meditation on divine names, through contemplation of the Sephirot, through ethical purification and intense prayer, they sought to merge their consciousness with the divine. Some reported success. Stories exist of rabbis who achieved such states of unity that witnesses said they glowed with light. Of mystics whose prayers manifested immediate effects. Of teachers who could perceive souls and past lives. These weren't considered miracles. They were considered the natural result of spiritual practice. The Merkaba texts describe the dangers involved. Ascending through the heavenly palaces wasn't safe. 4 rabbis attempted it. 1 died. 1 went insane. 1 became a heretic. Only Rabbi Akiva entered in peace and departed in peace. The practice could destroy you if you weren't ready. Why? Because ego can't survive the encounter with ultimate reality. The small self, with all its fears and desires and identifications, cannot remain intact when confronted with the infinite. Most people's psyches shatter under that pressure. Only those who've done the preparatory work, who've already loosened their grip on fixed identity, can navigate the experience without breaking. Enoch's 365 years of walking with God were that preparation. By the time he ascended, there was no ego left to shatter. He'd already surrendered it incrementally across centuries of practice. The transformation was the natural culmination of a process, not a sudden rupture. Modern New Age movements have latched onto Metatron, but often in superficial ways. They sell Metatron attunements and activations. They channel messages from him. They create meditations to connect with his energy. Some of this comes from genuine mystical experience. Much of it is commercialized spirituality. The real tradition is more demanding. It asks for your life, not your credit card. It requires discipline that most people won't sustain. It demands that you confront every shadow, every fear, every attachment. It insists you die before you die, that the false self must be sacrificed so the true self can emerge. This is why most people never get close to what Enoch achieved. Not because it's impossible, not because they lack some special grace or election, but because they won't pay the price. They want enlightenment without practice, transcendence without transformation, the destination without the path. But the path is the point. Every step Enoch took while walking with God was the work. The final transformation was just the harvest of seeds planted across centuries. There's no shortcut. There never was. So what does this mean for you? Right now, reading this, carrying your own struggles and questions and yearning for something beyond the mundane, what can Enoch's story actually offer? First, it proves that transformation is possible. Not through belief alone, not through hoping really hard, through sustained practice over time. The human form contains latent capacities that can be activated. Your consciousness is not fixed. Your spiritual nature is not limited to what you currently experience. Second, it shows that you don't need permission. Enoch didn't ask religious authorities for approval. He didn't wait for an institution to grant him access to the divine. He walked with God directly, continuously, until walking with God was his natural state. No intermediaries, no gatekeepers, just direct connection. Third, it reveals what the work actually involves. Not moral performance to earn divine favor, but consciousness development, meditation, breath work, working with sacred geometry and energy body activation. Ethical living, not as a rule to follow, but as necessary alignment for higher frequencies. Service not as obligation, but as natural expression of expanded awareness. Fourth, it warns about spiritual bypassing. Enoch didn't skip the human experience. He lived it fully for 365 years before transcending it. He didn't use spirituality to escape life. He engaged life completely while maintaining divine awareness. Any teaching that promises quick enlightenment without shadow work is selling you nothing. Fifth, it invites you into your own process. You won't become Metatron. That position is filled. But the principle he embodies, that humans can transcend human limitation through sustained spiritual practice, applies to everyone. Your transformation will look different. Your path will be unique. But the possibility is real. This requires shifting how you see yourself, not as a sinful creature needing salvation, not as a limited being hoping for grace, but as divine consciousness currently wearing human form. The body is a vehicle, not a prison. The ego is a tool, not your identity. The divine nature you seek is already present, waiting to be recognized and activated. Start where you are. You don't need to be special. Enoch wasn't chosen because he was different from other humans. He became different because of how he lived. That choice is available to everyone. Begin with awareness. Notice your thoughts without identifying with them. Notice your emotions without being controlled by them. Notice your body without being limited by its apparent boundaries. This simple practice, sustained consistently, begins to loosen the grip of false identification. Add practices that directly alter consciousness. Meditation isn't about relaxation. It's about training the mind to access non-ordinary states. Breathwork can induce experiences that crack open rigid worldviews. Plant medicines, used responsibly within proper context, can show you directly that consensus, reality isn't the only reality. Work with your energy body. You're not just flesh. Ancient systems describe subtle anatomy, chakras, meridians, nadis, energy centers, and channels. Learn to feel these. Learn to work with them. The light body isn't metaphor. It's an actual system that can be developed. Study sacred geometry. Certain patterns and proportions create specific effects on consciousness. The Metatron cube, the flower of life, the Sri Yantra. These aren't just pretty pictures. They're technologies. Meditate on them, build them, let them reorganize your neural patterns. Engage in service. This sounds conventional, but it's essential. Ego transcendence requires moving beyond self-focus. Serving others, not from obligation, but from recognition that others are you breaks down the illusion of separation. This isn't morality. This is consciousness training. Most importantly, don't make transcendence your goal. Make presence your practice. Enoch walked with God for 365 years before ascending. He wasn't trying to become Metatron. He was simply maintaining awareness of the divine presence moment by moment. The transformation was a side effect of sustained attention. If you focus on the destination, you'll miss the process. If you chase experiences, you'll become an experience junkie. If you compare yourself to mystics and saints, you'll either inflate your ego or crush your spirit. Stay with the practice. Stay with the presence. Let the results take care of themselves and understand that this path is long. You won't transcend human limitation in this lifetime. Maybe not in the next one either. But each step changes you. Each moment of genuine presence is its own reward. Each glimpse beyond the veil confirms that more is possible. The separation between you and the divine isn't a fact. It's a belief, a very persistent, deeply conditioned belief, reinforced by culture, religion, science, and everyday experience. But it's still just a belief. And beliefs can be questioned, tested, transcended. Enoch proved it. Not by being superhuman, by being fully human in a way most people never attempt. He didn't have powers you lack. He didn't possess special grace. He simply refused to accept that the physical world was all there is. He refused to believe that humans are fundamentally separate from God. He refused to live unconsciously. And that refusal, maintained across centuries, transformed him into something that shouldn't be possible according to conventional thinking. Something that threatens every system built on human powerlessness. Something that shows the potential dormant in every human being who walks the earth. You're reading this for a reason, not by accident, not by chance. Something in you recognizes the possibility. Something in you knows that life as you've been living it isn't the whole story. Something in you is ready to walk with God, even if you don't use that language, even if you don't subscribe to any religion. The path isn't hidden. It's been mapped by mystics across all traditions. The texts exist. The practices are available. The teachers are present, even if you have to look beyond mainstream institutions to find them. Everything you need is already here. What's required now is the same thing Enoch offered: sustained attention to the divine presence, however you understand it. Continuous practice, daily discipline, moment-by-moment choice to remain conscious rather than fall asleep. Year after year after year. Most people won't do it. They'll get excited by the possibility, read a few books, try some practices for a while, then drift back to conventional existence. And that's fine. There's no judgment. The path isn't for everyone in every lifetime. But some will hear this and know it's speaking directly to them. They'll feel the recognition in their bones. They'll understand that this is what they came here to do, even if they forgot for a while. They'll commit to the work, whatever it takes, however long it requires. If you're one of those people, then Enoch's story isn't ancient history. It's your blueprint. Not to become Metatron, he already is what he is, but to become fully yourself, to realize your own divine nature, to walk with God by whatever name you call it, until walking with God is as natural as breathing. That's the secret. That's the last thing you need to know about Metatron. He's not a distant angel to pray to or channel messages from. He's a reminder that the impossible is possible, that human limitation is not absolute, that you contain more than you imagine. The question is whether you'll accept that reminder, whether you'll take up the practices, whether you'll commit to the path. Because knowing this changes nothing, only practice changes everything. Enoch walked. For 365 years, he walked, and then he vanished into light. Not because he was special, because he walked. That's the whole secret. Just walk, just practice, just stay conscious. Do it long enough, consistently enough, and transformation becomes inevitable. The path is here. It's been here all along. Enoch proved it's real. Now you get to prove it for yourself.